If you look at last year when it had this like big weekly candle up, it then just continued to accelerate. Same thing in 2023, it just continued to accelerate. So ideally, this week, we see that acceleration. It is nice that Bitcoin has gone to an all-time high, and hopefully it can go higher. Remember in 2021 when it finally went higher, in October, it was only a sweep of the prior high from April. Ideally, we see more than just that at this point.
Benjamin Cowen begins by highlighting an astonishingly consistent pattern that Bitcoin has followed across multiple cycles. If you zoom out, you'll notice that each post-halving year, whether it's 2013, 2017, 2021, or now 2025, tends to follow a similar structure. A local high in August or early September, a pullback into September, and then a strong rally into a new all-time high during Q4. Typically October through December, Cowen points out that what we've seen this year lines up almost perfectly with that historical blueprint. Bitcoin peaked locally in August, dipped in September, and then began a renewed rally in early October, a rhythm eerily similar to what happened in past cycles.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
We went through this process pretty closely and even talked about how this might play out exactly like 2020 did, at least after the local high in August. You get a two-week rally off the bull market support band, a 2-week drop, and then a rally to a new cycle high. And that's basically what happened over here, right? 2 weeks up, 2 weeks down, and then you can see the rally that then ensued. What's really interesting about Bitcoin is that it seems to be repeating the same pattern over and over and over again, where it puts that high in August, it then puts in a low in September, and then rallies into a market cycle top in the post-halving year. Now, the high is not always August. Sometimes it's like early September, but going back to 2013, you can generally see a high in August, a low in September, and then a rally into the market cycle top. Same thing in 2017. You see the rally into the market cycle top after that September pullback. Same thing in 2021. And then, sure enough, once again, we saw the same thing play out. So it's funny because, it always feels like when we talk about like this is the most likely outcome, and then everyone does these like mental mind games where like, well, if everyone's talking about it, then it's not going to happen, and then it ends up just happening anyways. So I mean, it is nice that Bitcoin has gone to an all-time high, and hopefully it can go higher. Remember in 2021 when it finally went higher, in October, it was only a sweep of the prior high from April. Ideally, we see more than just that at this point. But I'd like to see some daily closes actually above the prior wick high. We haven't actually seen that yet. So you can see that wick there. We did get a close above, but then the second one we have not. So let's see if we can get some follow through by Bitcoin. The one thing to note is that Bitcoin dominance does continue to go up. So people are slowly getting the memo that liquidity is in fact flowing to Bitcoin. Some people I feel like are, on Twitter, they're like, well, what about Bitcoin dominance? Guys, it's been going up for 3 weeks. I mean, it is moving up, right? It was up 0.32%, then 0.99, and then 1.32, right? It is moving up. It might not be moving up as quickly as you want it to, but dominance is, in fact, moving up. So we'll see what Bitcoin does. The one thing I will say, with it now being October, is don't be complacent, right? Because as much as everyone wants to believe that this time is different, and as much as everyone wants to believe that it's like a 5-year cycle or something like that, anything's possible. Anything's possible. But the reality is that all major market cycle tops have occurred in the fourth quarter of the post-halving year. And I think it's prudent to just not get complacent about that idea as we progress through the fourth quarter. Now, unfortunately, no one has a crystal ball. No one can tell you exactly the price that Bitcoin will top at, whether it's 125K or whether it's a lot higher. But I will say that some of the things that you can use, like one of the things that you could potentially use is a couple of weekly closes below the 50-week moving average. That's usually a sign that the top is in. So again, that 50-week moving average is now at $101,000. And what you'll notice is that all prior tops were in when Bitcoin got weekly closes below that 50-week moving average. Normally it happens in that post-halving year or sometime in the midterm year. So watch for that. That's usually a sign that the cycle is over. We're not there yet, right? Like Bitcoin is still trending up. It's just something to keep in mind. For now, Bitcoin has bounced off the 21-week EMA, and then it came back down, found a higher low, and bounced again. So we've seen a really nice move by Bitcoin, but again, we want to see follow through. Last cycle, we didn't really get the follow through. Hopefully we can see it play out with a little bit more strength this cycle. But, you know, again, nothing is guaranteed. I think the way to think about this is the most likely outcome is top in Q4, right? And with Bitcoin putting in a new all-time high in October, it just kind of like validates this whole cycle theory stuff that, you know, even throughout the post-halving year, here we are, Q4, the post-halving year, and once again we have a new all-time high. And once again we have people saying that it's not going to be the quarter where the cycle tops out. Go into it assuming, in my opinion, I'm going to go into this assuming the top will be in Q4, and I'm going to be looking for indicators that'll provide, you know, confluence to the idea, you know, whenever that's in. In the short term, let's see if Bitcoin can get some follow through on this. If you look at last year when it had this like big weekly candle up, it then just continued to accelerate. Same thing in 2023, it just continued to accelerate. So ideally, this week, we see that acceleration. If for whatever reason we don't see it, then we'll have to talk about that. Because, you know, by some measures, right, we already are kind of far along in the cycle, depending on how you measure it. Like, if you measure it from the bottom, like, and you look at where we are right now, it would suggest we're further along than people think, you know, which is kind of a scary thought, right? It would suggest we're further along than people think. In fact, you could already argue that it's gone on longer than last cycle at this point, because last cycle topped after 1,059 days, and, you know, we're now at 1,061, 1,062 days. So it's actually already gone on a little bit longer than the last cycle, but the cycle before that lasted 1,067 days. That's if you measure it from the low. If you measure it from the peak, that's a little bit more optimistic, because if you go peak to peak and you compare it to 2 cycles ago, you could say that we're currently on day 1428, and 2 cycles ago didn't top until day 1473, which is basically more than a month and a half, right? So that would actually get you, you know, further into Q4, potentially even getting you into the last month of Q4 if you want to measure it from peak to peak. And if you want to measure it from the halving, ROI after the halving, you can see that we are, you know, 2 cycles ago it topped about 525 days after. Currently we're at day 534, and the last cycle was day 546. So again, like, by some measures, we're already further along than people probably think we are. But then by a lot of measures, like, we're not really close, because a lot of the peak indicators that you would think would be firing off haven't really done that, you know? And so we either have to face the, you know, the two choices are that we just haven't seen the parabolic rally into the market cycle top, or it's different, you know? And I don't really think anyone here is willing to accept that it's different and that you won't see a more extravagant rally just yet. But again, if you see Bitcoin sometime later on this quarter get weekly closes below the 50-week, that's probably it, right? That's probably it.
Cowen then points to 2 key technical levels that have historically marked major transitions in Bitcoin's market cycles: the 21-week exponential moving average, EMA, which often acts as a bull market support band. Bitcoin recently bounced from this level, reaffirming the strength of the uptrend. The 50-week moving average MA, which has traditionally confirmed the end of bull markets when price closes below it on the weekly time frame. He explains that in previous cycles, once Bitcoin recorded 2 weekly closes below the 50-week MA, that was effectively the confirmation that the market cycle top was in.
So we'll take it one day at a time. We'll do a video probably soon where we go through some of like the peak indicators, like some of the indicators that you would expect to sort of fire off, saying that like this is the top. Like we had last cycle, right? Because like last cycle, it wasn't in November, but in April of 2021, like all the indicators that people had created were essentially going off in April of 2021. None of them have really gone off at this point this cycle. The only ones that have are the time-based indicators, right? Like the this is how long the rally normally lasts after the halving, or this is how long the rally normally lasts after the low. Like those are the only ones that are starting to fire off. Whereas the other ones, the ones that try to help us identify euphoria, haven't actually done that yet. I think the scary thing is, you know, we haven't really seen new retail investors come back, right? If you look at the social risk, it still remains relatively low. So I guess, you know, are people going to come back, or people just don't care anymore? Again, like, do I think Bitcoin has done what it's always done? Yeah, because it's Q4 of the post-halving year, and it just put an all-time high. So we can celebrate that this view is played out. I think a lot of the euphoria, or lack thereof, comes from the fact that the altcoin market continues to struggle. And unfortunately, it's probably going to continue because Bitcoin dominance is likely heading higher. You know, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. The truth doesn't really concern itself with what other people think. But dominance is likely going to go higher as Bitcoin just continues to suck in liquidity from the rest of the cryptoverse. So again, one of the things I mentioned to look for confluence for these new all-time highs in Q4 was watch for Bitcoin dominance to go up. We saw that Bitcoin dominance was going up, so we said, all right, we're likely going to continue to see a rally into October, get a new all-time high. Because we see dominance going up, we see that the market is figuring out what matters. And sure enough, a new all-time high had happened. Bitcoin went to $125,000. 125.7K.
Cowen notes that despite Bitcoin's new all-time high, we haven't yet seen the kind of retail investor frenzy that typically defines a cycle top. Metrics like the Social Risk Index, which measures online engagement and speculative sentiment, remain relatively muted. This lack of retail excitement could mean one of two things. Either the final euphoric phase hasn't started yet, and we still have one last leg up to go, or the market has matured to the point where speculative euphoria won't return in the same way. Cowen leans toward the former, that we simply haven't seen the parabolic blow-off yet. He believes Bitcoin still has room for a stronger, more emotional rally, possibly driven by late retail entrants chasing momentum into the end of the year.